Okay, I ended the last talk on flying around, and this said frying fat, kerosene, cell, electricity. Well, it all sounds good, and we are giving you many messages. And as a young person, the first thing I want to say is do not start feeling guilty or anxious about anything. You haven't done anything yet. Of course, your parents may have not been as careful as they could have been, and as a community, we may not have been. As humanity, we are not even, because the rich people have been consuming more and emitting more and so on. But yet, we need to make choices as we go forward. So having all this information is useful. So carbon footprint of travel per kilometer in 2022. So it depends on many things. So the year reference year is always useful. And this nice figure comes from this site called Our World in Data, which provides some very nice information. So this is the carbon footprint of travel is as measured in grams of carbon dioxide equivalents per passenger kilometer. This includes the impact of increased warming from aviation emissions at altitude. So this has a lot of information. Let's see, let me unravel it for you. We've been talking about carbon dioxide. We said that's a greenhouse gas. Then we said there are other greenhouse gases like methane and N2O. And we also mentioned along the way that they stay in the atmosphere for different amounts of times. That's what we call the residence time. So CO2, we said many times, can last for centuries, and methane, we said, lasts for about 10 years. N2O also can last for centuries, couple of centuries. And we said N2O is much more powerful as a greenhouse gas. Methane is much more powerful as a greenhouse gas compared to CO2. So if you have multiple greenhouse gases and you want to, understand their impacts on trapping the thermal energy and increasing amount of energy in the Earth system and how that causes warming, then you want to convert them all to the same basis. It's like saying you are, let's say, in some country and you want to buy something that's you have to buy from America. Then America is telling you how many dollars it is, but your currency is not dollars, so you have to convert your currency to dollar to see how many of your currency you will end up paying, because the price is in dollars, right? So when we say carbon dioxide is causing global warming, let's say that is a standard, and we say 1 kilogram of or 1 gram of carbon dioxide causes some amount of warming. Then we said methane is 25 times as powerful, so then we have to say per gram of methane how much warming does it cause, and then N2O, per gram of N2O how much warming does it cause, and we can convert it to how many times CO2 that is. So that's what we call carbon dioxide equivalent. If you understand, fine, because you also have to see how long you will compare. You have to keep the gram of carbon dioxide for the same amount of time as gram of methane, gram of N2O, and so on, and altogether we come up with a common metric. Okay, so that's what it means. And we said the impact of increased warming from aviation emissions at altitude. Aircrafts take off and go up at different altitudes based on how big they are, how small they are, and so on, and they emit all these greenhouse gases at different levels, and depending on where they are, the even the emissions of just water vapor from the engine can cause warming, because you know already that water vapor is a greenhouse gas, right? Do all that, and then you assume that you are, if you compare a domestic flight to a diesel car, then you have to be careful that domestic flight is carrying a certain number of people. If the plane is not full, then the amount of fuel burned can be less because each person adds a weight and hence a fuel need and so on. So it is quite complicated, okay, but you can still take this that domestic flight has much higher emissions per passenger kilometer. If you travel 1 kilometer by domestic flight versus diesel car versus petrol car and short haul flights versus long haul, so you could be going just from your hometown to the next town, which is still covering many kilometers, but if you fly longer, the efficiency of the airplane goes up, so you consume less, you emit less. Motorbike, bus, on average bus and local London bus which stops goes, and plug-in hybrid, so it uses internal combustion engine or a petrol and diesel engine as well as a battery, so it's a plug-in hybrid electric car which is carrying a battery and is not using any fossil fuel other than what is used to charge the battery. And the national rail, because that's a public transportation that's being used by many people, trams in little towns, London Underground, the tube, the coach, the bus, ferry, where you have to count for foot passengers, and Eurostar to Paris and so on. So the main point I want you to understand is that flying causes a lot of emissions per person kilometer. So if you fly once, you may end up creating as many emissions as eating a hamburger every day for a year. Okay, so if you fly, you can pay somebody to plant trees for you. That is called carbon offsetting. You emit something and you offset it somewhere by planting trees and taking out CO2. Does it always work? Well, there are many issues as well. So you can see with all that background that domestic flight per passenger kilometer in 2022 was 246 grams. Diesel car on the other hand was 171 grams, and petrol car is 170 grams. Short haul and long haul flights are slightly different. Motorbike is lower, but it only carries 1 or 2 people, so efficiency also matters. Plus, you may not be rich enough to fly or buy a car and so on. So bus is okay, but bus may take more time and may not be convenient because bus stop may not be in front of your house, so you may still have to get to the bus stop somehow. Same for the airport, of course, and so on. Okay, so this is a nice information that you should keep in mind, that flying is in general, considering everything that I mentioned, is very heavy in terms of carbon footprint and potential for affecting climate. So what does that mean? Does that mean you should stop flying? Well, you have to be careful because aircraft companies are making money, governments are making money from that, people are conveniently traveling, and people are working for airlines and airports. So there are people who live on these jobs, and then you want to see nice places, don't you? You like going around, you know, it's good thing. You want to fly to places where you cannot walk or take a bus or drive, and get there quickly, see as many things as you can, meet people, learn about their culture, visit their museums and beaches or temples and mosques and churches, and learn their history. So cultural exchanges are made possible by flying around, which is quite convenient, and so on. So we have to consider all these things together and make a decision, and it can just boil down to saying, I will not fly unless it's absolutely necessary. And if your parents say, let's go on a vacation, you can ask, can we take the car instead, or can we take the bus and the train, and so on and so forth. Okay, and see what kind of car they have. Do you want to bother your parents so much? Well, it's good to ask them to see if they have thought of all these things and what advice they have to give you on these decisions, and what kind of philosophy they are using. Are they saying, I don't care about climate change? If so, what can you do about it, knowing all the things you learned from here, and so on. So every decision is burdensome. It's not so easy that you just choose a flight or a car or a motorbike or walk or bicycle and so on. Plus, remember that we said before, a person who takes a train may still end up eating so many burgers that his overall or her overall carbon footprint may be larger than yours, even though if you flew a couple of times in a year. So complicated. You just want to learn and you want to understand these things and not feel guilty and not tell anybody that they are bad for flying and so on and so forth. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and we'll come back and look at more things, good things like electric cars, and it'll be fun. Okay, that's what you want to do. As you grow older, you can see, how can I have fun and not be bad for the environment? What can I invent to reduce emissions or not have any emissions? Can I somehow find a machine that'll take the emissions out of the air, or will capture it from the car I'm driving or the motorcycle I'm driving, and so on and so forth. Come back and see me about the electric cars now. Okay?